Hey everyone, it's been a while. Welcome to my new place. I moved and it threw me all out of kilter with recording new videos. So I thought I'd get on with recording a new one. Got a new setup, a couple more screens, lots of light, and I'm hoping to work on something really interesting soon. Thinking about live streaming the building of a startup in very public. Building public has been a thing for a good while now on places like Twitter, but posting a tweet when you're supposedly building public, accidentally only doing so when times are good or very bad, isn't really a true representation of the startup journey. So I was wondering about a better way to do that. And I think I'll be doing that soon. But I realized that I don't know whether I've actually told the story face to face camera before of the startup journey that I went through. And I'm not going to turn this into a massive monologue. My camera actually only currently records for 30 minutes before it turns black. So I'm going to try and keep it kind of short and sweet. But a couple of people have asked me this recently, and I realized it's probably better just to have a video recorded that I can send them to save boring them to tears every single time. Namely Tom on Twitter, who asked this question and said that it sounded like a really cool story. I appreciate that. It's sometimes really easy to take what you've done so far for granted when it's a story that you tell every day. But yeah, as you asked where the best place to hear this story was, and I wasn't really sure because it's probably in bits over lots of different places, I thought I would tell it in full here, again, within a limited amount of time. So let me get started. Dffrnt is the company I run, and that currently provides an alternative to an accelerator experience for anyone, anywhere to get business support on demand and perks and benefits, and an ecosystem, a global community of other people building similar things or things in similar ways. But we didn't start here, obviously. So where did we start? Well, the really early part of the story, long story short, is I went to uni, dropped out of uni to start my first business, was looking at salary tables of who earned the most money. And the only one that I really liked the look of was architect, but that was a 7-year education period, and I've got a short attention span at the best of times, so probably wasn't a good idea to get started there. But there was this mysterious job at the top that said managing director, and I thought, hey, that looks really interesting. It sounds like they get to make their own rules, and they can earn an unlimited amount of money. I think that the salary table I looked at was from 0 to infinite, whereas all the others were 50 grand to 150 grand or whatever it might be. So I decided to pick that one and chose a business to start with that was, playing to my strengths. It was a brand agency. I was good at computers. I was fairly creative. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to create brands and websites and all kinds of marketing material and visual assets for people and learn as I go along. Got a job as a letting agent and started to build a company from scratch. I had no idea what I was doing. And this is the reason that Dffrnt exists now, because no one really understands what to do when they start a business or where they should go from day one. And potentially even at day 1000, it's really difficult to know what to do next. So it's the importance of having an ecosystem around you. So yeah, I started that and grew it really, really slowly. It took me 3 years while I was working part-time as a lettings and sales agent, property sector, and worked with friends of friends, worked with people I didn't know eventually. And that's when, business becomes real, in my opinion, or hits a certain kind of traction stage, at least. Worked on a joint project with a person who ran a social agency, and we really got on fairly well. Decided, actually, this probably makes sense. I've got skills I can bring to the table. You've got a team and some skills that you can bring to the table. Let's put these two things together and turn them into a slightly larger company. We did. We realized very quickly that what we meant to do was to become an integrated agency, do all things for all people. And we realized very quickly that that was probably not the best thing to do, because in becoming everything for everyone, we became nothing for no one. So we retracted that, We doubled down on social because we were all under 30 at the time, and we would potentially lose a web job to somebody who was 10, 20 years our senior, but we wouldn't necessarily lose a social job because we grew up with it and actually looked like we know what we're talking about at that age. Did that. And I was a biz dev director. It's my job to go out and win work from people. But I was always realizing I was the youngest person in the room, and I recognized my privilege all the time, and realized that, you know, even though I was the youngest person in the room, I was still probably the odd one out. Where were the people that were just as young as me, or the people that weren't me, right? The people that weren't, you know, white dudes or anything close to that description. You know, where was everybody else that weren't just old white dudes in suits, which is basically every single room that I was in. I really enjoyed being the odd one out because it's a great opportunity for me as somebody who's a learned extrovert, an extrovert at work, I would say, more so than at home, to have a conversation starter. There were many times where people would say, "Hey, Ash, can you get me a drink?" Not knowing that, you know, I wasn't working there. I was actually there to do exactly the same thing they were doing. And then this realization that, yeah, there were probably swaths of people that were of the same mentality as me that just weren't in that room because they couldn't afford it, couldn't access it, didn't have the confidence to be there, didn't even know about it in the first place, and a whole bunch of other reasons. It wasn't a room that looked like them. I felt, hey, I probably need to do something about this. At the same time, I realized that my friends just didn't really get what I did for a living. My parents probably never will really get what I do for a living. And I wanted to selfishly find a space and a group of people that really understood it. You know, I was going to these events with these people that were 10, 20, 30 years my senior, and they were talking about kids and houses and holidays and retirement, and none of those things were relevant to me at the time. It just wasn't culturally applicable. I couldn't talk about the ills and the challenges I had at that stage and that age. And so I wanted to find people that just really got it. And I set up an event. I was a brand guy, so the operation wasn't very good at that point. It was very new, but I set up an event and called it the Young Entrepreneur Networking Association. I branded it as such because it meant that I could attract more people into the journey because they felt like they trusted it. It looked official. It looked, interesting for them to come along and check out. So I did that and put it online. And I remember one guy specifically saying, "Hey, does this mean you don't want to engage people of an older generation? You're going to miss out on knowledge." Of course, very good point. But the reality at that time was that it wouldn't have been a safe space, psychologically, mentally, at least, wouldn't have been a safe space for the next generation of people like me at the time, to connect with one another. We wanted our own space. And I think that's been historically true, through the ages. Lots of people want their own space to feel heard, seen, and find other people just like them. It's how communities come together. And that's what I really wanted to find. So I did set it up. 5-6 people came along to the first one. I don't know how many signups we had, probably, a few more than that, but 5 or 6 people turned up to the first one. And I was really nervous, ran the event. And by the end of the event, which was just a couple of beers around a table, by the way, just realized actually how awesome that was. And I'd scratched my own itch, but what I realized subsequent to that was that I'd scratched other people's itches. They really kind of appreciated the fact that I put that event on. And they asked this, they said this was great. And they asked when the next one was. And I had no idea. So I just said, next month. And the long story short is that we've run those events ever since, up until COVID. People came from all sorts of locations. We started in Bristol in the UK. And then someone came from Bath to the event. And they came a bunch of times. And Reza Saidi being the person in question, shout out Reza, absolutely lovely guy and a good friend now. He said, "Hey, look, I'm coming from Bath on the train every single time. Bit annoying. Can I run this in Bath instead?" I said, "Yeah, just making it up as I went along still. Cool, let's do that. Let's figure out how we can make that happen." And we did. And he ran one in Bath on a regular basis. And then the same happened in Cardiff, and the same happened in Birmingham, the same happened in Manchester. And all of a sudden, I'm on the motorway up and down the country every month, 4 or 5 times, paying for it. The events are completely free. It's not a business yet. I'm not charging any money for anything. And a community is born. And at that point, I started to realize, hey, we probably have something here. Like, you know, I'm doing this whilst I'm trying to build a marketing agency, and I'm meeting people who are asking what they can buy from me, but I don't have anything to sell to them. So I started asking them what they wanted, and they all said something different. It's not the reason why Dffrnt's called Dffrnt, but I might start claiming it is because it sounds great for the story. But yeah, they all said something different, and I put it in a box, a virtual box as it were, and called it a membership, and away we went. And this was at a time when, you know, membership organizations were already a thing. It had been for you know, hundreds of years, but online communities and membership organizations had just started to proliferate and become more apparent. So kind of caught that wave a little bit. And yeah, and then, you know, what happened from there was coming up with something to sell and selling it. Actually, the membership at that time was more expensive than it currently is, weirdly, and way more useless than it currently is. Unsurprisingly, we had a membership card at one point. Don't even know what that was for. I think it was to show people in bars that you were a member, and we would, you know, pay for them to have a free drink at each event. And I remember that being a stupid idea because we launched in London, and those drinks cost more than the membership half the time. So that just lost us money, and I cancelled that fairly quickly. Probably got a couple of membership cards tucked away somewhere. I would send handwritten letters to every member that joined. We were launching in other locations all the time. Got a tiny bit of funding to go back to London and get that going, which we did. I actually had 70 quid left over from that funding, which I thought, oh, that's going to be great. I'm going to use that and spend it on something nice. And then I missed my train home from London, and it cost me exactly £70 to get the taxi from the late sleeper train, which got me back into Taunton at like 3 a.m. in the morning. Absolutely insane. And yeah, and then we just grew, and the community grew, and then, you know, people came from all over the place. Someone came to Bristol from Sheffield, which is a 4-hour drive to come to a free meetup, and that told me that I was solving a much bigger problem than I realized. You know, there's clearly a deep rooted emotional connection to what we were trying to achieve, and people were coming from far and wide for it. So expanded over time. The events grew, and pre-COVID, we were running 100 events a year in 21 cities across 9 countries, about 4,500 people a year signing up to come along completely free. Built an email database of 7,000 people, a meetup community of 12,000 people, and a brand that started to penetrate that people understood, with brand partners that were paid to reach these people. A business was basically born out of that. So we started with events. And I know, Tom, this was your question on Twitter about how Dffrnt had started, and that was it. That was, you know, started as one humble meetup that had no idea it was going to go and be a business and be the better part of the next decade of my life, which is scary and makes me feel a little bit sick when I think about it. The company is by no means where I want it to be yet. You know, the 2 years of a pandemic slowed down the events to the point where we don't run any right now. There aren't any safe local, well, there are with other organizations, but via us, we're not running our safe local events for, you know, people in their local communities for free anymore. It's just me now here in the company over time, having 1, 2, 3 people at different times helping out. The community are incredible. They're still amazing. They're still doing amazing things. Over the last 12 months, we've seen over £20 million of active fundraising happening within the community, which is just, you know, unheard of, especially for a community that's now, for all intents and purposes, run by me, by one person. And there are a whole bunch of other opportunities that exist going forwards. I'm working on something big, and what happens next will hopefully be really exciting, which is why I'm going to try and live stream it on this setup here and show you all what's happening as we go. In a nutshell, I want to solve the problem that business is hard. Starting and growing one is one of the hardest things you'll ever do as a career. And yet the solutions are so dispersed, and it's such a minefield of cowboys and wannabes, and that's dangerous for the failure rate, which is incredibly high. So I have some plans. I won't share them all with you now. I've got to keep something close to my chest for now. But yeah, I'm working on a solution to fix that, to hopefully put everything you need in your pocket. it's going to be fun, going to be exciting, going to be challenging. I might end up even live streaming some fundraising meetings, but we'll see. But that is the story so far. There are more granular pieces along the way that I probably wouldn't be able to fit into the less than half an hour time limit my camera gives me. But maybe I'll buy a new camera and I'll tell it a bigger story in due course. But that's it. Yeah, Dffrnt started as a meetup. It didn't even start as Dffrnt. We've moved, shaped, changed, developed, iterated over time, changed our name, had a couple of different offices, and away we go. And I think what Dffrnt really does tell the story of is a business almost always isn't what you think it's going to be, sold to who you think you're going to sell it to, at the price you think you're going to sell it at. Almost always, I would argue potentially every time somebody starts a company, one of those, if not all of those variables will change. And Dffrnt's just a clear proof of that being the case. What we are today will continue to change. It will be different probably next month. Excuse the pun. The name is great, but it's also confusing sometimes. It will be not the same next month. There are other changes coming in what we're doing before this big plan even hits the live stream and kind of my Twitter feed. But yeah, that's the Dffrnt story. And I'm more than happy to dive into extra bits if anybody wants to hear them. Just leave a comment. Like and subscribe, I think, is what I'm supposed to say here. There is some more interesting content coming soon, so maybe you want to do that. And yeah, thank you again, Tom, for the question. Hope this kind of answers your question and is good listening, at least we're in the car, in the bath, in the shower, something. I don't want to distract you from your day. I know you're a very busy man. And then subsequently also thank you to everyone that's been part of the journey so far. The things that are about to come are by no means not, or by all means because you existed. So thank you for that, and thank you for creating this amazing foundation on which to build from. But yeah, so I guess the moral of the story is if anybody's thinking about starting anything, don't hesitate. You know, it might just start as one event and it might turn into a bit of a beast. But you got to run that first event to get going and see where it leads. So go do it. And if you ever need any support, then the Dffrnt community is here to help you with that. And if you ever need any other questions answered about the story or what you should do next, then just tweet me at AsherFizzle on Twitter, and I will be more than happy to answer. But I'm going to leave it from there, and I'll probably catch you in the next video. But yeah, stay good and stay rebellious.